Hello and welcome to the next tour with
Ian?
and Andia. Thanks for joining us today. We are on episode 12. We're here doing a transition and a resume with Pat Williams, and I'm going to let Ian now introduce her.
Yeah, so thank you, Pat, for joining us. Pat spent 35 years in the U.S. Navy, 5 years enlisted, and 30 years as an officer. So she did her enlisted time as an administrative professional and then spent her 30 years of uniform service on the officer side, ultimately retiring as a captain, as an HR expert. And she is now leveraging that capability through the Military Officers Association of America, or MOA, as the program director for engagement and career transition services. So Pat is the quintessential expert in resume writing and LinkedIn profile reviews. In fact, she was my first stop when I retired and was looking for help in that realm as I transitioned into my civilian service. So, Pat, welcome. It's so good to have you here and so good to see you again.
Thank you, Ian and Andy. It's so great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Well,
can't wait to jump right in.
yeah, and I think it's no secret that we like our friends at MOA quite a lot, with already having Lila on the show. And she suggested that you would be an excellent expert. And then of course, the connection with Ian I think was fantastic. So like Ian said, we'll jump right in. So as a service member like Ian during transition gets started, what are some of the most important things that service member can consider when they begin to develop their first post-service resume?
The resume is often, along with the interview, the elephant in the room. But you want to just stop and think real simply about it, because translating your military experience into civilian terms is going to be the key. You want to avoid that military jargon that we are all so very familiar with, and instead focus on plain language that any civilian can understand. Focusing on your specific skills, your specific accomplishments, your skills quickly become your superpower.
Right.
Include those key metrics. The so what. In other words, what should the reader care about what you're saying? Why should they care? And these are skills that are all desired by that target employer or the target industry. And you want to use civilian friendly job titles and descriptions, whether it's, instead of saying something like platoon leader or squad leader or petty officer, you would say team manager or something of that nature. And then with your experience of leading teams, number of people, amount of money, those kinds of things, and create that resume that is tailored to each job you apply for, using those succinct bullet points to showcase your accomplishments and measurable achievements. Because really, the resume's purpose, as Ian will attest to, is to provide that specific information on your skills and attributes that support an objective that's tied to a given job or target industry. So those are my first two things, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I really appreciate how you linked not just the resume piece, but the language piece as it goes into the interview part, right? Because we spend so much time in uniform really honing a completely different language and being able to update that language into what the rest of the world speaks, quite frankly, is important. So if I could kind of pull that thread a little bit, you talked a little bit about the interview piece. What are some of your top tips in how to best prepare for that first interview in the civilian world?
It's so interesting. You mentioned I did the 35 years of service, and I thought I would just go somewhere and just kind of chill and relax somewhere that was military retirement pay friendly. But then I thought, okay, I'm a little young to sit down and do nothing. So this job opportunity that came about through networking, just on Friday, we did one of our career fairs or career seminars, and my two sections are focusing on resumes and interviewing. So I do this session called Ace Your Interview. So the most important thing with the interview is research, research, research. Prepare in advance to ace that interview. You want to practice answering common interview questions. You can use the STAR method. If you've never heard of the STAR method, it's simply
Yeah.
situation, task, action, results. And a lot of people use it for interview prep, but you can also use it to help you neck down your resume as well.
Mm.
You want to research the company, the job opportunity, and then tailor your responses, not just in your resume, but also in your interview to their specific needs, because that's all they care about, right? Is their job need. It's impacting their bottom line. You want to emphasize your technical skills, your soft skills, including your ability to adapt, your effective communication skills, your leadership, your teamwork, problem solving abilities, all these things that the private sector is interested in that transfer well from military service. Think of your interview as that opportunity to share your unique professional story succinctly. Remember to always answer any question in 2 minutes or less, right? Because an interview where you're doing all the talking that's going on and on and on, it's likely an interview that's not going well. So you want to stay focused.
Right.
Because just remember, who knows you better than you? You know yourself better than anyone else. So you can speak to anything that you've done throughout your career, no matter the question. So just remember, first impressions do matter. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. So always be aware of your responses, of your nonverbal cues, and then be sure to treat everyone as the hiring authority, because you never know who the hiring manager is. And so ignoring one person in favor of another, you don't know who that hiring manager will be. So use the golden rule and do send a thank you note. You'd be surprised at how
Yeah.
many interview candidates do not just send a simple thank you. It can be via email within 24 hours to each person you've made contact with.
Yeah.
I
And
think,
oh,
yeah, sorry.
please, no.
I think those are some really important details. And I would say, I've hired a few people in my past and other jobs that I've had, and I do think there were two things that I looked for. What the first one was, if there was a ability to add a cover letter. I loved it when somebody added a cover letter. Not all jobs will include a cover letter or the ability to add one, but if there is one, definitely add one, because that was one thing I looked for. That set people above the rest, especially when you're dealing with a lot of applicants, right? And then the second one was always, did they send a thank you letter or a thank you note? And there are different ways of doing that. You don't have to send a handwritten one in the mail, snail mail. Email is acceptable. So I'm glad you brought that up as well. But I do think that those are really important tips.
Absolutely. And I was just going to highlight that those tips were exactly the tips that I followed and tailored in my post-military, journey to find employment. So yeah, that STAR method piece, being able to talk, and use it not just in the verbal context, but in building the resume piece. Pat, you're hitting on all the things that have made my journey in this realm very successful, and I'm glad that you're re-highlighting what's working. So thank you.
Absolutely. I think that, yeah, and you even taught me how to use the STAR method, because I actually hadn't used that before. So, and we'll make sure that we send some resources in the show notes from this episode as well for folks. So that brings me to my next question for you, which you already talked about, was networking and how important networking is. So, when you think about that strategy, what are some of those tricks for networking, and how do you maximize that and best leverage your network, especially if maybe you haven't had a big network outside the military community, but that was one thing he really had to work on, was LinkedIn.
Yeah, in a big way.
Yeah. So, how do you leverage that network?
It's so funny. Whenever I do a resume critique, and I've got one that I'm going to send out tomorrow to schedule, say, hey, let's have a conversation. And they say, oh, Pat, you've given me so much to think about. I always, always, always tell them to focus in on that LinkedIn profile, because really, if you think about it, the resume is dependent on someone getting it into the hands of the target employer, where that LinkedIn profile is hanging out there 24/7, 365. So you never know when someone might be on LinkedIn. It's skill word based, it's keyword based, and it's biased towards those who are more active on the site. So you never know when they may be searching and you might pop up. So you want to be ready with that. But first things first, you want to be sure to craft your 30-second commercial, or that elevator pitch, the one that you can articulate in 30 to 60 seconds or less, the time it takes to ride from the top of a building to the bottom in an elevator, hence the name. So your networking connections know who you are, your spouse, your partner, your significant other. They know who you are, and as importantly, what you can do. You want to be prepared for that question. So, Andio, what are you going to do when you transition? Ian, what's next for you? What's life like after the military? I was nowhere near as ready as I should have been when I was asked that question. I had no idea because I hadn't thought about it in advance. So you want to take
Mm.
the time, do that personal self-reflection, think about who you are, what you want to do, your next best life, and prepare that 30-second commercial in advance. And then also be sure to leverage your network, leverage veteran resources, build and hone and maintain those relationships. Reach out to people. They can be peers, subordinates, bosses, former bosses, current bosses, that whole 360 notion of folks that you can talk to. Tell everyone, your neighbor, the baker, whoever, that you are transitioning, because you never know when someone might be talking to you and think, hey, wait a minute, I got a guy or I know someone. It's join veteran organizations. Hiring our heroes is fantastic. ACP, American Corporate Partners, have a great mentoring program. The LinkedIn Veteran Mentor Network, MOA, has a LinkedIn career networking group where you just want to reach out to fellow veterans who successfully transitioned. Really, 75% of your time should be spent on networking. Why? Because 80 to 85% of folks will get their next job through networking. That's how I landed up here at MOA. I served 2 different tours at the Naval Academy. I was first director of admissions, had a great time, went off, did some great work for the Navy, got a by name request, went back as their chief diversity officer. And while I was there on that last tour, I met a staff judge advocate or a lawyer. And now we weren't close personal friends or anything. We were just colleagues. Fast forward, she transitioned about 2 years before I did. So fast forward about 3 years, we were just doing lunch one day, and she mentioned what she was doing at MOA and the nonprofit world and how I should consider it. And I hadn't done any research at all. In fact, I tell my boss I would hate to see the resume that I submitted to MOA. He assures me it was fine. And at MOA, we do ask for a resume and a cover letter. So if you're asked, always be sure to send what the job application is asking for, that resume and that cover letter. So I raced home, did a resume, applied. And because she had dropped my name as a connection to the hiring manager and to the HR professional at MOA, internal candidates and networking connections, if someone's indicated that if you see this resume come across your desk, they typically almost always get an interview. There's no guarantee that you will get the job, but those networking connections and those internal candidates, it's just simply HR hiring succession planning etiquette. You'll get the opportunity to interview, but it's then where you seal the deal. So don't sell it short, those networking opportunities. You want to make sure that you're going to everyone you can. I remember when I was my last tour on active duty, I was the deputy director, deputy comptroller, well, basically the budget officer for our chief of naval operations, the 4-star that runs the entire Navy. And
Wow.
one of the events, it was a big job. So I was super busy. I didn't have time for transitioning or any, that's why I wasn't prepared, right? So I went to one networking event. It was called the Bank of America. Now, I didn't want to go into banking or credit cards or anything like that, but it was called the Bank of America, Washington, D.C. Cyber Networking event. I went simply because people started saying, hey, you should be networking. And me, like many people are, I am a self-professed introvert. So being introverted is by my nature who I am. So I said, okay, I'm going to sashay over to this networking event, even though I'm not in cyber, I'm not in banking. And I made some wonderful connections. Did that turn into a job? No. But they introduced me to other people that I would never have been introduced to before. So you want to take advantage of those opportunities. We just did a virtual career fair on Wednesday. You can do this in person, you can do it virtually. I would attend as many as I can because, again, you don't know who's going to be talking to someone and say, hey, I got a guy, right? Or I know someone who can do the work that you are looking for. So networking is extremely important. Again, spend the bulk of your time networking. Attend as many events as possible, whether it's in person or virtual, and it will pay huge dividends.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love what you said too about that commercial, right? There were so many events and things that we went to in that year before you were transitioning where a lot of people would say, so what's next for you, Ian? Like as soon as he said, he was getting ready to transition and being able to spout that off very quickly and because you never know who you're going to meet. And I think that is such an important distinction and to really something great to focus on, right? As having that
Yeah.
commercial,
Practice it.
your elevator
Practice it.
speech.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And practice it for your spouse, practice it for your close friends. Make sure, it's getting your point across succinctly. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, and it's funny as you talked about, how the networking piece is, and you describe yourself as that introvert and getting out there. I felt as though you were describing me too. So we're kindred spirits in that respect. So kind of to that end, I know what I would tell myself, 2 years ago ahead of transition. Is there something that as you would look back at where you were just before you took the uniform off? What would be the single best piece of advice that you could tell yourself, um, you know, a few years back, to best prepare you for this transition?
Well, I think of it in two parts. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, hey, Pat, what are you going to do? I would have said something in HR because the bulk of my work was in human resources or financial management audit. I really enjoyed that, or the diversity inclusion space. So that's what I would have said. But looking back, you want to make sure you do your due diligence and your preparation and your research. It pays to do your homework in advance. Have those conversations. Go on those informational interviews where it's non-threatening, right? Because you're not asking for a job. This is networking, quintessential networking. Reach out to people that you know, people that you don't know, invite them for a cup of coffee, do it virtually because people love nothing more than to feel like they've helped someone else. And people also love to talk about themselves, how they were
True.
successful, how they got where they are, what's going to make you successful, what it takes to be successful in their industry. So to go on those informational interviews, do that due diligence,
Mhm.
have those purposeful conversations with potential employers, connections at those jobs, because purposeful networking and detailed research about the job, about interview prep, and about salary benefits negotiation. Because in the military, no one has to negotiate salary, right? As an 06, you're going to get the same thing. And
True.
either service, get Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, they're all going to get the same pay, basically, as an 06. So salary benefits negotiation, talk to people about how you ended up where you were, what it takes to be successful where you are. And what you
Mhm.
find is people genuinely want to help. So my biggest piece of advice is do your homework, do your research,
Yeah.
self-reflect, that take stock, that personal self-assessment of who you are, where you want to go in your next best life. That dream job um, that makes you want to leap out of bed. And in my case, racing across the Woodrow Wilson Bridge across the Potomac into Old Town Alexandria, into a job that I love, right? It keeps me connected to the military and veteran community and population. So
Yeah.
start doing your homework, do your due diligence.
Absolutely. No, that's fantastic advice. I really appreciate you talk about being deliberate with it, but it's also, if I could be so bold, it's a really great way to talk about goal setting. And that's important too. I think as folks take off the uniform, oftentimes they can feel perhaps a little disconnected from, something that they can give back to. And I think that's an important piece to be able to highlight there too. And I really appreciate you flagging that, Pat. That's really, really great. So yeah, this has been awesome.
Yeah, it's been great to chat with you today. And I think these are all so helpful. And I just want to give you the opportunity, is there anything that we missed that we didn't get to cover that you'd like to bring up? If not, we'll roll into our next part of the podcast.
I mentioned it a few minutes ago. I thought I would do 35 years. That's a long time to work, right? And this to just go chill. But then I thought, okay, you're a little young to sit down and do nothing but, I don't know, stream some silly shows, watch soap operas, eat bonbons, and get fatter all day long. So I was really grateful for the opportunity to network and to go back into the workplace. So I would like to share that there is life after the military, regardless of your years of service, whether you did 4, whether you graduated from a service academy and didn't commission and didn't do any years, you did 4 years, 5 years, 6, 8, 12, 30, like I did, 35. Transitioning is not only an opportunity to find meaningful work. It's an opportunity to find your dream job and to shape your next best life. You have earned the right to do exactly what you want to do in this life that you've got after service. So people are actively looking to hire veterans. So you got to do the process, do the research, dig in, get in there, make those networking connections, and you too can be successful as a post-military.
That's
Great advice.
yeah,
Yeah,
perfect. And I'm
absolutely.
really glad that you continue to give back, because again, we've personally benefited from having you as part of our network. And I think that's that exclamation point that you can put on the end of it. So thank you so very much. Really appreciate it, Pat.
Thank you, Ian and Melody.
Yeah.
Great. Well, now we get to play to have a little fun. So
Game time.
so yeah. So the first thing is what's in your rucksack. Now this is a little part of the podcast where we come up with things that you would want to bring from military life into your civilian life now, and things that you would like to leave behind. So I'll send that over to you now.
Thank you. Thank you both. This has been such a fantastic opportunity. I love nothing more than talking about networking, interviewing, resumes, what's best, your next best life. The one metaphorical item that I would carry from my many years of military service into civilian life is that can-do spirit, that attitude, because it lends credence to the notion that anything is possible. You too can land where you want to be, doing that ideal thing, right? That one that makes you want to leap out of bed every morning, getting paid what you want, even if that means being your own boss. I mean, my mom ran her own restaurant for 27 years, and that's not easy work. So you
Yeah.
get to decide who you are, what's best for you and your family. And so I just take that can-do attitude with me, that esprit de corps, that anything is possible. Now, what I would leave behind is the indomitable bureaucracy. Want to
Yes.
avoid any possible micromanagement and stifling of ideas and innovation, because you never know where that next best idea is going to come from. So those are my two things, that can-do attitude. Let's get this done, and then and just avoiding the micromanagement or the bureaucracy that can come with a lot of jobs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Spot
So
on. I
true.
couldn't agree with both of those more.
I know.
Fantastic. Definitely. Okay, so it's now my turn to introduce you to our next game, and this is called Two Truths and a Lie military style. So our last guest, Hannah, is a Marine Corps veteran, and she gave us her uh, three facts, and I'm going to go ahead and read them to you now, and you get the opportunity to guess which one you think is the lie. Okay, so number one, Hannah said she met her husband on the rifle range, and they eloped 6 weeks later. Number two, she said she was the first woman Marine to win Rookie Recruiter of the Year. And number three, Hannah said she knows how to build rockets. Which one is the lie?
Oh my goodness. Number three.
Oh,
That was my guess.
that was her guess. Yes, that in fact is true. While she won Rookie Recruiter of the Year, she was not the first female Marine to do so. But yeah, very impressive young lady. Hannah has, and her husband are about ready to transition out of his active duty career here very soon. And yeah, so serving as a member herself and a soon to be retiree and a middle spouse, that's pretty impressive what they do. So, okay, so over to you, Pat. What are your three facts? And we'll reveal which one is the lie on the next episode of the next tour.
My goodness. Well, military service is not for everyone. It does take a special sort of diligence to be prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice. I came in as an E3 and I thought I would get out. I hated the Navy at first. And fast forward 35 years later, my sister laughed because I wasn't ready to leave the service. I mean, my 35 years of naval service were incredibly rewarding. I would do it again in a heartbeat. But she laughed because when I was in boot camp, when I was off to candidate school, my first tour, I was hating life. And then the lie, I think, the notion that we tell ourselves, I am, we're loving this ideal way of life. Life in the military can often expose you to long deployments, time away from family, risk of life, limb, death, serious injury, even PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome. So it's not for everyone.
Mhm.
It is indeed a misnomer that anyone can be everything to everyone all of the time and not sacrifice something.
Yeah,
Yeah, very true.
absolutely.
Very true. All
Well,
right.
thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate it, Pat, from, Ian's experience with you to, the great recommendation of Lila. And I think it was really clear this was a great conversation for us to have and share with our audience. So we're so happy to have you here with us today.
Oh
Definitely,
my
Pat.
goodness.
Thank you
Thank you
again.
guys so much. This has been fantastic. Lila is amazing. She is fantastic. So I very much appreciate this opportunity to talk and hopefully share some tidbits of information that may help someone else.
Yeah,
Awesome.
definitely.
Yeah. And I think that's what we're here to do. Absolutely. So thank you everyone for joining us today for episode 12. You can please follow us on YouTube. You can like, comment, subscribe. Please listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, Amazon. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn, and we would love to connect with all of you. So thanks again, Pat, for being here today.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
The views, opinions, and advice expressed by our guest on the next tour are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the podcast, Ian, Andia, or any affiliated organizations. While we strive to provide helpful and accurate information, this podcast is for informational purposes only. We encourage listeners to consult with professionals or conduct their own research before making any significant decisions related to military transition or post-service life. The content is intended as guidance and personal perspective, not as official advice.